Hello, good day, and welcome to another training video. Now, in this video, we are going to go over the contents around the building calculator. So for this building calculator, it comes with a mandatory 24 questions that are required to ensure that you can get a result. So if you notice on the final cost area, you won't see any cost highlighted unless you input this data. Now, there are two questions of this 24 that is not many times going to be mandatory. And that is question 9, because question 9 depends on the answer at question 8, and question 20 depends on the answer at question 19. Depending on what you select for these, you'll get a statement in the question after. So for instance, this is saying, will driver ceilings be used? And let us say I put it at no. The question 20 will tell you to skip the question because it now becomes irrelevant. And it's the same thing at question 9. Now, to come back from the start, we have the first question that is something that you must know, and you're going to get this most time from architectural drawings. Now, one other thing to note is that there are some drawings that come with the units in metric, that is meter square, and then you're going to have drawings that come in square feet. The calculator requires a measurement for area in square feet, and it is required per floor. So for instance, this particular drawing, I can use the area that's here on the basis that it's a one-floor dwelling. But if it was a two-floor dwelling, I would have to look for something which would refer to as the area calculator, which as you notice here, it's saying the same 153. In another drawing, such as this, I would not take the area, though in square feet, from the front page because it is two floors and I want to represent the calculation for each floor separately. So in this case, it is saying what the area is at different levels. And each time you're using the calculator, as a reminder, you are specifying a level when you're doing an estimate. It is not practical to do the two floors as one combined total square footage because it will misrepresent a lot of info, especially if you are not sure that the financing of the customer will reach to the end. You want to specify per floor to ensure that you're controlling the presentation of costs. If the area is coming in square meter, you are going to have to do what you call a conversion, which is you're going to have to multiply the meter square by 10.76 to get the area, or I can do the opposite of that, which is that I can come on Google and I can say convert meter square to square feet. And I then could come here and say 153. Then I would get this and I could copy it and carry it over to the calculator. Now you'll notice that there's a minute difference between these two units because I have used 10.76 as the rounded off figure. And if you notice here, it is 10.764, which is the exact unit that is supposed to be used. Now, question number 2 deals with the height of the building, and that can be arrived at by looking at the cross sections on an architectural drawing or based on consultation. So if there's not a drawing, you want to ask the question to use it as a context. And if there's a drawing, you can always look at it and see what the height is. Now, the height refers to the internal height from the floor to the underside of the slab. That is our reference. Now, in cases where the slab is stepped up or the floor is stepped down, you might have a ratio that you might have to use. So for instance, this is saying that one side of the slab is 10 feet, and this is saying one side of it is 11 feet. In this case, I would more go off the 11 feet to be in the safe position and ensure that I am capturing as much data. Now, question 3 asks the type of estimate, and the type of estimate is really specifying whether you are doing a labor only quotation or you are doing a material and labor. The fourth question is asking about what aspects of the construction you will be carrying out, and this relates to whether or not you are going to be doing wet work only, which is just doing the rough building up to the point of rough cast and render, or it's a case that you are going to be doing the building up to the finishes stage. So that is something that comes with these two options. You are required to specify one. In this case, I am only just saying wet work only, just to show you how the calculator works. Now, the other question that's here that's asking about the area of the property. Now, this is something that you can arrive at from the drawing. it is particularly important when it's a case that you're going to have to clean a property, and therefore you want to know what size of the property needs to be cleaned. So you have these options to be considered. If it's an upper floor, then it would be the answer none, because land area would not relate to something that's up in the air. But in this case, I can choose one of these. I am choosing this here based on the drawing that I am looking at, but you have different drawings that you can specify different area by either consulting with the customer or even just checking the size of the survey report to see the property that you're working with to ensure that you understand what answer to use. Now, question 6 is asking about finishes expectation. Now, we often know finishes from the point of getting basic grade, medium grade, or high-end finishes. So in that, you are going to specify one of these. In most cases, people are going medium because it's midway between. Now, question 7 is asking about which level of building you are working on. Now, in this particular case, this is just the ground level, which is the main level. There's not an upstairs and downstairs. But in this particular dwelling, it has 2 floors. So I want to specify which one of these relate the main level, which is the most than the ground floor. I can also specify a split level, which would come with other drawings. So for instance, I was doing a building like this and I was only specifying the area. This is at the lower end. I would still specify it at the main, as the main, but on this end, because part of it would be supported by the ground and part would be supported by the slab. I would say this level, which some people might look at as the main level, would be the split description because it is split between some ground and some slab support for the level. The final option that's saying upper is always going to be when you are dealing with a upstairs, like a first floor, which is completely disattached from any split levels and is not supported by the ground, but instead is supported by a suspended slab as seen right here. Now, question 8 is what controls question 9. So if I would use, like for instance, private sewage instead of central, it's going to ask what kind of drainage system do you plan to use. Now, there are 2 options here. The options will increase as the calculator advances, but in this case, I can specify 2 of the most common patterns, which is a septic leading to a tap field, or we can say a septic leading to a reed bed and a soak away. There's also many times the use of a chlorinator, but that will be added at a later date. Now, question 10 is asking how the building will be covered, and that you can get from the elevations as well as the sections. So in this case, you can clearly see that there's going to be a suspended slab on the building from the elevation and from the cross sections. So in that case, I can use slab slash decking because decking is the most common term used in Jamaica. So you have that option. Or you can have a situation where you're doing all roof, which is somewhat similar to this, and you would use the roof option. Or you can have a combination of roof and slab, which is also an option. Now, question 11 to 18 is related to site setup. So it's going to ask question like, will the property need cleaning? And you have to answer this with either yes or no. You are going to be asked at question 12, are tall trees on the property that require to be removed with machinery? That is similar to having a property like this, where you are not going to have to carry in equipment like a backhoe or excavator to remove tree roots and etc. to make the site usable. In this case, I am going off the picture, so I'm saying yes. The other question that's at 13 is asking, will the building area require to be flattened with machinery? And that is similar to what you see here, where you have to carry in equipment to split the land to allow for there to be like a split level, a lower level, similar to what's seen next door here, and there to be a higher level. So this equipment cost is one that has to be factored into the overall budget. So if it is a scenario that the land is flat, like the first model that I use here, you would not need that, and the answer would be no. But if it is that you have observed or the drawing is implying that you're going to have to do reduced leveling, the answer would be yes. Now, question 14 is asking if there's any storage shed on the property. That is a storage shed. The other one is asking if there are bathrooms on site. It's asking if water is on the site. And similar to this picture, I can observe what is there and what's not there. So in this case, there's no indication of a water line. There's no indication of electricity. Number 18 is asking if a water storage tank is going to be needed. Now, this is highly recommended, but you can have situations where you are going to work on a location and there are drainage or water storage facilities already on site. So that is something to consider. Now, question 19 is asking about if there's any suspended drywall ceilings that are a part of the building design. That is something that you can observe from drawing sections, but there are other cases where there's like ceiling design. So for instance, this particular scenario is showing the similar thing to the one that I just looked at. But if you go to the drawing long enough, you will find that they have actually indicated ceiling design, especially in the interior. So in this case, though it's not showing on the sections, if you look to the drawing long enough, you can identify that this building requires ceiling bed. So like using a drawing like this, the answer should be yes. Now, in answering question 19 as yes, question 20 is going to say we need to specify the kind of ceiling. So looking back at the same drawing, you can see that there's a combination of designer ceilings as well as flat ceilings. Now, number 20 is very much optional depending on how you're working. Now, question 22 is asking about the architectural design approach, and that many times is dealing with how much architectural input is going to be in the project and is being displayed in the drawing. So for instance, you can see a scenario where a small drawing like this is coming in with like 34 pages. On average, most time when a person is doing a basic drawing, they are not going to put so much pages if they're not having very high expectations. The more sheet that comes with the drawing, from you see 20 sheets upwards, on a small drawing, then most times you know that the expectation of the customer is high. Now for 23, you have to observe similar to what you do in 22 as to the amount of detail. Also, you have to look at the combination of reinforcement that you use. So on a traditional building, when there are structures that are put together, you're going to find on average mostly half-inch 3/8, and in some cases minute usage of 5/8. But if you see where it is a lot of 5/8, 3/4, even 1 inch being presented, then that's very advanced. That's not the basic or the traditional stuff that you go to in different buildings in Jamaica. Now, the final question is question 24. This is saying what kind of soil type. Now, soil type is something that you have to observe, but what you can do is use a provision at the beginning. So, for instance, I can look at this and I can know it's marlstone because it looks a bit marly. And it can also be many of these other types of soil that is identified here. And based on answering all of these, which you can see on the calculator is using the term or the badge that says required here, then I can get a result. So from this info, I can know what the final cost of the building is going to be. Now, as you notice in this setup, it is not specifying finishes. So remember, this said only wet works. So in the calculator setup, it is not calculating finishes, which it has the finishes badge or the general works badge here. It's just dealing with the rough work, and the rough work that is being identified is material and labor. And you can play with this a bit. If you are estimating, you can change these around. That was material and labor. It can come to labor only, and you notice the calculator will calibrate, and it will also advise you that you are getting a labor only quote. So these badges that you see at the end is also there to help guide you. So it is saying that general works, wet works, wet works, wet work, and then it shows you where finishes come in, and you can see where these have been excluded in this scenario, and it is saying the type of estimate similar to what's used around here. This says labor only, and the calculator is telling you that it's a labor only cost here. So therefore, you are guided. You don't just reach a point where you present something and you cannot understand or you didn't remember what you were quoting on. So therefore, nobody can say you did tell me this without you having a reference. Now, similar case, that's a reminder. If I put that to material and labor, you will notice it will state that it's material and labor. Now, the info that's presented here, I always recommend that you either do a screen print to capture the combination of costs and the combination of conditions. Because when you give a rough idea, you want to remember clearly what the conditions were for which you presented your quote. You do not want to be trying to remember in your brain alone. You want to have evidence to say these are the conditions of the code. But anyway, that's where I'm going to be closing off for today. Hopefully you can use this tutorial video to help you when you are doing a calculation for a building. So, hope you have a great day. Take care.